What's going on? How everybody doing? I'm well. I'm back at practice today, so I'm thankful.
First team reps for Shedeur Sanders, but what I will say is he was impressive today in the last session, which was kind of this 11-on-11 hurry-up situation type stuff. Had two really nice throws. One to Deontay Johnson on a crosser, backed up 3rd and 12 with about 20 seconds left on the clock and one timeout, and then he followed it up the very next throw with a brilliant throw, layered on a skinny post or a seam route rather to.
I was definitely hearing his voice in the back of my head, but at the end of the day, I want to be productive. I want to give you guys the best work, and I want to be at my best at all times. Sometimes you'll go in hot, then you'll wait for a second, then you'll get cold, then get back hot, then get cold, and my arm and body wasn't used to that, so it's just an adjustment like within the body, within my arm.
His reps in camp and he's got a sore arm. Why? Well, people say he throws a lot before practice and after practice. Well, how counterproductive is that?
Well, I'm sure there's a method to the madness.
Back to Shedeur in that hungry dogs, had the opportunity period. There was a one-on-one for the push-ups on the line. Luke Floria made a great move on kind of a deep over, got around the corner. It had to be layered in kind of over him out in front. It was a perfect ball from Shedeur. So, yeah, I've been very impressed with him. And, all people saying, oh, it's going to be a circus, it's absolutely nothing. He comes in, he works really hard, and he's done a great job. And you've got Shedeur Sanders, who, by all accounts, was a first or a second-round talent, even from his detractors on tape, that the Browns were able to get in the 5th round. And I think he's been very impressive in the early going, not only in terms of his ability to throw the football where he wants it, his ball placement, but then what he's done to throw the football where he wants it, his ball placement, but then what he's done behind the scenes, and in terms of understanding what it takes to play quarterback in the National Football League, all the pre-snap things, all of the play calling, all of those things that he really wasn't asked to do much of in Colorado through no fault of his own. The young guys, not named Kenny Pickett, so Gabriel or Shedeur, one of the rookies, really starts to elevate and separate. You've got to find a way to give them the reps and give them the opportunity.
Echo, who I just think if you're the Browns, what are you doing? Wow. Who, through no fault of his own, commits one of my cardinal sins of quarterbacking, which is he's tiny. And so, he's tiny.
What can Shedeur do? I think it's important to see what he can do this season, because if he's good, then maybe you have your franchise quarterback. And that obviously you need to see what your rookies can do. And I do think they think of Gabriel as like a backup, like a career backup maybe.
What if I told you that one of the most talented quarterbacks in the 2024 NFL Draft, a player that Browns insider Nathan Zagura calls 1st or 2nd round talent and who's now dominating training camp with a 77% completion rate, was deliberately passed over by 31 teams in a coordinated effort to avoid the Deion Factor? The evidence is staring us right in the face, and what happened to Shedeur Sanders in the draft might be the biggest conspiracy in modern NFL history. I'm about to expose something that the NFL establishment doesn't want you to know. While everyone's been focused on Shedeur Sanders' incredible comeback performance at Browns training camp, those two highlight-worthy throws, his poise under pressure, and his ability to thread the needle like we saw with that dime to Luke Floria, they've missed the real story. This isn't just about a talented quarterback proving doubters wrong. This is about a systematic conspiracy that allowed Cleveland to steal a franchise quarterback in the 5th round while 31 other teams played along with an unspoken agreement. Today, I'm connecting the dots that reveal how the NFL's Old Boys Club orchestrated one of the most blatant draft manipulations we've ever seen. Let's start with the most obvious evidence, the massive disconnect between Shedeur Sanders' actual talent and where he was drafted. Nathan Zagura, one of the most respected Browns insiders, didn't mince words when he said Shedeur, by all accounts, was a 1st or 2nd round talent even from his detractors on tape. Think about that statement for a moment. Even his critics acknowledged he had 1st round talent, yet he fell to the 5th round. But here's where it gets interesting. Zagura specifically mentioned that this assessment came from detractors on tape, meaning even scouts and analysts who didn't want to like Shedeur couldn't deny his abilities when they watched the film. So if the tape showed 1st round talent, and even his critics admitted it, how does a quarterback with that level of ability fall to pick 164? The training camp evidence supports this conspiracy theory perfectly. In his return from arm soreness, Shedeur completed 7 of 9 reps with what observers called confidence and command. That throw to Deontay Johnson on a crosser in a backed-up 3rd and 12 situation? That's not 5th-round quarterback play. That's franchise quarterback material. The way he leaned back with defenders collapsing all around him and still delivered an absolute dime to Luke Floriera, threading the needle with perfect touch and timing. These aren't lucky throws. This is elite quarterback play that 31 teams somehow convinced themselves they didn't need. Compare this to Dillon Gabriel, who completed only 11 out of 22 reps when given the opportunity to shine in Shedeur's absence. Gabriel had a golden opportunity with a receiver wide open and not a single defender in sight, yet the ball came out awkward, too low, and completely off target. This is the quarterback that teams felt more comfortable drafting ahead of Shedeur? The math doesn't add up unless there was something else at play. Even more telling is Zagura's praise of Shedeur's ball placement and his ability to put the ball exactly where it needs to be. These are fundamental quarterback skills that translate directly to NFL success. When a respected insider says a player has the ability to throw the football where he wants with precision, that's not 5th-round talent. That's exactly what teams spend 1st-round picks on. The conspiracy becomes clearer when you realize that teams regularly reach for quarterbacks with far less talent than what Shedeur displayed. Yet somehow, 31 teams found reasons to pass on a player who's now being called the best thing at Browns training camp. This wasn't an oversight, this was coordination. Here's where the conspiracy gets really deep. The NFL's systematic fear of dealing with Deion Sanders created an unspoken agreement among teams to avoid drafting Shedeur early. This wasn't about football talent. This was about organizational politics and the league's old guard protecting themselves from a disruptor they couldn't control. Think about the narrative that surrounded Shedeur leading up to the draft. Critics like Tony Grossi were already laying the groundwork, questioning everything from his work ethic to his toughness. Grossi's comment about Shedeur having the fewest reps in camp with a sore arm and asking why wasn't just criticism, it was part of a coordinated character assassination designed to justify why teams were passing on obvious talent. But here's the smoking gun. When Dillon Gabriel developed hamstring soreness and had to sit out, where was Grossi's criticism? The same Grossi who questioned Shedeur Sanders' toughness and work ethic has suddenly gone silent. No harsh words, no doubts about Gabriel's commitment, no wild narratives, just quiet acceptance. This selective outrage reveals the coordinated nature of the anti-Shedeur campaign. The conspiracy worked because it gave teams plausible deniability. They could point to character concerns or circus atmosphere fears while ignoring the obvious talent. As Zagura noted, people were saying, "Oh, it's going to be a circus. It's going to be AC, it's absolutely nothing. He comes in, he works really hard, and he's done a great job." The circus narrative was manufactured to justify passing on elite talent. What makes this conspiracy even more obvious is how quickly the narrative changed once Shedeur got to Cleveland. Suddenly, respected analysts like Nathan Zagura are calling him exceptional, Nick Wright is saying he deserved to be the starter, and Broussard is urging the Browns to give Sanders a shot because if he's good, then maybe you have your franchise quarterback. The timing is too convenient. These same qualities that are now being praised, his mental sharpness, his understanding of what it takes to play quarterback in the National Football League, his pre-snap processing, existed during the draft process. Teams knew about these abilities, but the coordinated fear of the Deion Factor made them untouchable. Even more damning is how quickly teams filled their quarterback needs with inferior talent rather than deal with the Sanders family. They preferred to reach for lesser prospects or stick with proven failures rather than draft a player who's now starting to separate himself from the rest of the crowd and showing he can help the Browns win right now. This wasn't 31 independent decisions. This was a coordinated effort by the NFL establishment to avoid disruption, even at the cost of passing on franchise-changing talent. The numbers don't lie, and when you examine the statistical evidence from both the draft process and training camp, the conspiracy becomes undeniable. We're looking at a systematic pattern of bias that allowed elite talent to fall to the 5th round while inferior prospects were selected much earlier. Let's start with the training camp statistics that Nick Wright highlighted. He pointed out that each time the numbers were presented, Shedeur Sanders was either leading or consistently outperforming the other quarterbacks. This wasn't a one-day fluke. Wright emphasized that Shedeur continued to perform at a high level day after day, showing a consistency that the other quarterbacks couldn't replicate. The specific numbers are staggering. In his return performance, Shedeur completed 7 of 9 reps, a 77.8% completion rate under pressure situations. Meanwhile, Dillon Gabriel, who was supposedly a safer pick, managed only 11 of 22 reps, exactly 50%, when given the chance to prove himself. That's a 27.8% difference in completion rate between the risky pick and the safe one. But here's where the conspiracy evidence gets really damning. These performance gaps existed before the draft, yet teams systematically ignored them. Shedeur's college statistics showed consistent high-level performance, yet 31 teams found reasons to pass. The statistical analysis was available to every team, but the coordinated narrative about character concerns and circus atmosphere provided cover for ignoring objective data. Even more revealing is the pattern of how teams filled their quarterback needs. Multiple teams drafted quarterbacks ahead of Shedeur who are now showing inferior performance metrics. The statistical evidence suggests that teams were willing to reach for lesser talent rather than deal with the perceived complications of drafting a Sanders. The training camp numbers also reveal the manufactured nature of the criticism. When Tony Grossi questioned why Shedeur had arm soreness despite having the fewest reps in camp, he was creating a false narrative. The statistical reality is that Shedeur was being limited in reps not because of poor performance, but because of organizational politics. Yet when he finally got opportunities, he delivered at a 77.8% clip. Wright's analysis of the competition is particularly damning. He looked at the statistical reality of who Shedeur was competing against: Kenny Pickett, who had already been given ample opportunities to prove himself but had failed to convince anyone he was the franchise quarterback; Joe Flacco, whose best days were behind him; and Dillon Gabriel, who Wright dismissed as tiny and statistically limited. The conspiracy becomes clear when you realize that teams preferred these statistically inferior options over a player who's now posting elite numbers. This wasn't about football evaluation. This was about systematic exclusion based on non-football factors. The statistical evidence shows that 31 teams coordinated to ignore objective performance data in favor of manufactured concerns, allowing Cleveland to steal a franchise quarterback in the 5th round. The most damning evidence of this conspiracy isn't just in the draft results, it's in how the media systematically coordinated to create and maintain the narrative that justified 31 teams passing on elite talent. The pattern of coverage reveals a level of coordination that goes far beyond coincidence. Start with Tony Grossi's targeted campaign against Shedeur. His criticism wasn't random, it was strategically designed to create doubt about a player who was clearly outperforming expectations. When Grossi questioned Shedeur's work ethic and toughness over minor arm soreness, he was providing talking points for teams that needed justification for their draft decisions. But here's the smoking gun: the complete silence when Dillon Gabriel faced the exact same situation. The same Grossi who questioned Shedeur Sanders' toughness and work ethic has suddenly gone silent. No harsh words, no doubts about Gabriel's commitment, no wild narratives, just quiet acceptance. This selective outrage reveals the coordinated nature of the media campaign. The conspiracy gets deeper when you examine how quickly the narrative flipped once Shedeur proved the doubters wrong. Nathan Zagura, who's now calling Shedeur the best thing he's seen in the Browns training camp, wasn't blind to this talent during the draft process. His current praise, highlighting Shedeur's elite ball placement, mental sharpness, and understanding of what it takes to play quarterback in the National Football League, describes qualities that existed before the draft. The coordination becomes obvious when you see how multiple media figures suddenly felt comfortable praising Shedeur once he was safely in Cleveland. Nick Wright boldly declared that Sanders should be the Browns starter, while Chris Broussard urged the team to give Sanders real in-game reps. These same analysts were notably quiet during the draft process when their voices could have challenged the manufactured narrative. Even more revealing is how the media handled the circus narrative. Zagura directly addressed this manufactured concern, all people saying, "Oh, it's going to be a circus. It's going to be AC. It's absolutely nothing. He comes in, he works really hard, and he's done a great job." The circus narrative was a coordinated media creation that provided cover for teams to avoid drafting obvious talent. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidental. During the draft process, media figures either stayed silent or amplified negative narratives about Shedeur. Once he was safely in Cleveland and couldn't disrupt other teams' plans, suddenly these same figures felt comfortable acknowledging his elite abilities. The media coordination also explains why Shedeur's outstanding training camp performances are being treated as surprising when they shouldn't be surprising at all to anyone who properly evaluated his college tape. The manufactured shock at his success reveals how effectively the pre-draft narrative suppressed honest evaluation of his abilities. This media coordination wasn't accidental. It was a crucial component of the conspiracy that allowed 31 teams to justify passing on franchise-changing talent. The final piece of evidence that exposes this conspiracy is how Cleveland Steel in the 5th round has revealed the systematic failure of 31 other organizations. The Browns didn't discover hidden talent. They simply refused to participate in the coordinated avoidance of obvious elite ability. Nathan Zagura's assessment makes this crystal clear. The Browns were able to get a first or second round talent in the 5th round. This wasn't shrewd scouting. This was taking advantage of other teams' coordinated decision to avoid a player they knew was elite. Zagura's emphasis that even Shedeur's detractors on tape acknowledged his first-round talent proves that the evaluation was never in question. The conspiracy is exposed by how quickly Shedeur has validated Cleveland's decision. His performance, completing 7 of 9 reps, delivering highlight-worthy throws, showing poise under pressure, isn't the result of sudden improvement. This is the same player who was available to 31 other teams, yet they all found reasons to pass. Even more damning is how Cleveland's success with Shedeur is making other teams' decisions look increasingly foolish. While Dillon Gabriel struggles with a 50% completion rate and misfires, lack of accuracy, and poor reads, Shedeur is starting to separate himself from the rest of the crowd and showing he can help the Browns win right now. The conspiracy becomes undeniable when you realize that multiple teams had greater quarterback needs than Cleveland, yet they still passed on Shedeur. Teams that are now struggling with inferior quarterback play had the opportunity to draft a player who's being called the best thing at an NFL training camp, but they chose to participate in the coordinated avoidance instead. Chris Broussard's current advocacy for Shedeur reveals how obvious this conspiracy was. "I think it's important to see what he can do this season because if he's good, then maybe you have your franchise quarterback." The fact that a respected analyst is now suggesting Shedeur could be a franchise quarterback after he fell to the 5th round exposes the systematic failure of the draft process. The most damning evidence is how Cleveland Steel is being treated as brilliant front office work when it was simply refusing to participate in league-wide collusion. The Browns recognized that the circus narrative was manufactured, that the character concerns were overblown, and that the talent evaluation was being systematically ignored by other teams. Nick Wright's analysis of the competition Shedeur faced in Cleveland, Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco, and Dillon Gabriel, reveals how inferior the quarterback options were that other teams preferred over Shedeur. Teams chose proven failures and limited prospects rather than draft elite talent because of coordinated fear. Cleveland's success with Shedeur isn't just exposing bad draft decisions, it's revealing a conspiracy that allowed 31 teams to coordinate their avoidance of a player they knew could be franchise-changing. The Brown steal is actually evidence of the NFL's biggest draft conspiracy in modern history. The evidence is overwhelming. Shedeur Sanders didn't fall to the 5th round because of talent concerns. He fell because 31 NFL teams coordinated to avoid the Deion Factor, even at the cost of passing on a franchise quarterback. The systematic media campaign, the selective criticism, the manufactured character concerns, and the coordinated silence from analysts who are now praising his elite abilities all point to one conclusion: this was the biggest draft conspiracy in modern NFL history. Nathan Zagura's assessment that Shedeur was first or second round talent that Cleveland got in the 5th round isn't praise for the Browns scouting. It's an indictment of a league-wide conspiracy. When a player is dominating training camp with a 77% completion rate, delivering highlight-worthy throws under pressure, and being called the best thing at an NFL facility, yet 31 teams found reasons to pass, that's not coincidence, that's coordination. The conspiracy worked perfectly until it didn't. Cleveland's refusal to participate in the coordinated avoidance has exposed the entire system, and now other teams are watching a potential franchise quarterback develop while they're stuck with the inferior options they chose instead. This isn't just about football. This is about how the NFL's old boys club protects itself from disruption, even when it means passing on generational talent. The Shedeur Sanders draft conspiracy proves that the league will sacrifice competitive integrity to maintain organizational comfort. What do you think? Was this a coordinated conspiracy, or did 31 teams just happen to make the same massive evaluation error? Are we watching the biggest draft steal in history or the exposure of systematic collusion? And most importantly, how many other elite players have been blackballed by similar conspiracies that we'll never know about? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe 31 teams coordinated to avoid Shedeur, or is there another explanation for how first-round talent falls to the 5th round? And if this conspiracy is real, what does it say about the integrity of the NFL draft process? Make sure you're subscribed because next week, I'm diving into the financial implications of this conspiracy, how much money teams left on the table by avoiding Shedeur, and which franchises are now scrambling to cover up their participation in this coordinated failure. You won't want to miss that investigation. Hit that like button if you think this conspiracy goes deeper than just Shedeur Sanders, and let me know in the comments, which other draft surprises now look suspicious when you apply this conspiracy lens. I read every comment, and I'm particularly interested in hearing from anyone with inside knowledge of how draft boards really work. The rabbit hole goes even deeper when you examine the financial motivations behind this conspiracy. Click the video on screen now to see how much money was involved in keeping Shedeur away from certain markets, and I'll see you in the next investigation.